Right. Welcome. And this is Deborah Leanne. And I am here with another of our Luminary Leaders speaker series. And our guest today is Jill Badosky. Before we get started, I would love to just tell you the reason why I selected Jill. I am all about, I just get jazzed working with women to help them see their light so they can shine their unique brilliance into the world and make the difference that they are here to create. And what I'm finding over and over and over again, especially with entrepreneurs and executive level women, is that they lose their joy. They are so driven to do that they're not operating from the feminine practices of being, and they also just forget about joy. They forget about the beauty of creating and how fun that can be. And it's a neglected art of really being creative and enjoying the process as well as the doing part. So to tell you a little bit about Jill, she is a multimedia artist. She is internationally recognized as a workshop leader, and she's the founder of the Kaizen Muse Creativity Coaching Certification Training. And we'll get into that a little bit. And she's also the author of 3 books on the creative process, including her latest, The Muse is In, an owner's manual to your creativity. She has a background that's pretty wide, and we'll also talk about that, in psychiatric occupational therapy, marketing, performance art, and improv. Jill is also a certified yoga instructor and has been teaching yoga for over 20 years. So I'm looking forward to having you and I learn more about Jill as she and I talk a little bit more about the beauty of creativity. Welcome, Jill.
Thanks, Deborah. It's wonderful to be here.
It's fun. And I am hearing somebody that I'm going to mute. Let's see here. There we go. So to get started, I have all kinds of questions, but I am really curious if you could just tell us, I mean, you've done so many things. I mean, you even told me you've done stand-up comedy or improv. I know you used to work at Hallmark and you were like an illustrator there. I hope that you wrote some of those really funny ones that used to make me stand and laugh out loud when I was browsing the cards, back in the day when we used to buy cards. And I just would, and then getting into the whole creativity coaching. Who would have thought that that was a need when you started that program, 10 years ago or more? So if you could just tell us a little bit of the arc of your experience and what drove you to either begin or start or add these other pieces to your medicine bag.
That is a long story. We could take up the entire hour. So I'll try to do the Reader Digest version. And I don't recall working for Hallmark.
Oh, sorry. I knew that you did, that you had done some type of
I've been greeting cards before.
That's what it was. I think I just put Hallmark in my mind.
But you're very creative too. You created me as an employee for Hallmark. So,
yeah.
Well, I started in occupational therapy with adolescents in psychiatry, and I fell in love with the creative process right there, because when I was working with them, I saw how different they were when they were working on something creative. And so I started researching creativity and insanity at the time, since I was working in psychiatry. And Rollo May was one of the only persons that had a book out on creativity that we could really relate to. Then I got my master's degree and I went into management. I was managing psychiatric units and ended up in Kansas City and then Washington, D.C., and was not really following my own dream at that point. I was using my creativity to become successful, but it was somebody else's definition of successful. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And so I made a bold move and just quit without having a job because I was so miserable, because I felt like I was selling my soul. And at that point, I wasn't really ready to be the type of person who quits a job and doesn't have one. So some fool in San Diego hired me, and I continued in psychiatric hospitals, but I was still burnt out, which was a really great experience to be in the wrong place when you're eventually going into working with people that are in the same place as that. And also a really good part of that experience was getting laid off and having one of my biggest fears realized, what am I going to do without a job? And it turned out that having been at the end of this management gig and not even having a choice whether I was going to stay or not, being face to face with this fear, it was the best thing that could happen to me. When one of your biggest fears is the best thing that can happen to you, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, bring some more fears on. What else can happen here? And at that point I went into improv comedy, and I worked part-time as an occupational therapist, but I started to inspire my escape from working for somebody else. And I was writing articles for magazines. I was teaching yoga. I was doing graphic arts. I was working at a bookstore. So I was doing all sorts of things to support myself. And then eventually I put together a business where I was doing creativity workshops. Somebody at one of those workshops asked me to coach them. I had no idea what that meant. But as I sat face to face with them, I was in a place where all of a sudden I was lifted above my body and going, this is so much fun, and I seem to know what I'm doing here. And when I tried to write a book, I came up with all the blocks that I was kind of working with other people. I was resistant towards it. I was procrastinating. I was thinking, who am I to write a book? And so I went to a life coach, and I got even more blocked from that life coach. And she was putting me on a real linear line in terms of, okay, you want to write a book? Well, next week, bring in a chapter. And I would come in the next week and I go, because you told me to write a chapter, I actually didn't want to do anything. And because when you're creative, you're rebellious.
Yeah.
And I thought, how many people are getting life coaching when they're creative and being blocked? And that's when I decided I needed to serve humanity and to put together my own creativity coaching. And I think I was one of 2 or 3 people, at least that I know of, that was doing that at the time. This was back in 1997 that I started creativity coaching. And that's how I wrote my first book. I discovered all of these tools, and I packaged them in the guise of 9 modern-day muses and a bodyguard, and started dispensing muses to people and finding what worked for people, what worked better for people, what worked for myself. I seemed to be blessed with a lot of creative blocks, so I got to look at what worked for me, and that became my first book. And I guess that brings us, well, then there was the one-woman play, there was the other books, so that brings us
pretty close. And I have this book already in front of me, and I just thought it was so clever about how you have each of these muses with their own personality and their own, I guess, is it for them to help us through the blocks, right? Each one of them has an antidote or a way of, like I'm looking at Be Silly and reading this whole thing on humor, and I just thought something that's so underutilized as a tool. When we're looking at problem solving, we don't think, oh, maybe there's a way to laugh my way around this. We just don't, we get even dig in deeper almost. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, can you just give us a quick rundown of the different muses and their roles so that we can see how they would apply to different parts of our obstinance or problem solving?
Sure. And to me, some people, the muses are too whimsical for them. So these are actually profound practical creative principles.
Yes.
And what they are is we have so many voices in our head, and these might sound familiar to people. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm too old. I don't know where to go. I've got too many ideas. Those are not the voices of the muses. Those are the voices that kind of keep us from being creative. The 9 modern day muses in a bodyguard are relationships with ourselves that are going to work for our creativity. So each one of these 10 entities, they're packaged in muse form just because you have to depart from logic and get into your imagination right off the bat to deal with them and their personalities. But each of them have a way to talk to ourselves that's going to work better than our ego and our fear. So the first one is the bodyguard. And the bodyguard, I had a bunch of principles, and there was only 9 muses, so I couldn't squeeze all of them into 9, so I had to invent this bodyguard. And the bodyguard is all about our creative process needs to be protected. It needs to be protected from our own judgment, from the judgment of others. Our time needs to be protected. So it's what you say to yourself and the relationship you can have to yourself to protect your creativity. And then there's Aphrodite, and she uses the muse of paying attention. And this is so important in terms of our ego likes to pay attention to everything we do wrong. And Aphrodite is like, let's pay attention to what we're doing right, where we're getting it right. One of the most powerful questions I have in my creativity coaching, when somebody comes and goes, I'm overwhelmed, I'm procrastinating, I ask them, well, has this happened before? And if it has, what worked? So this is paying attention. And they always come up with an answer. They move out of victim into this place of wise. Of course I know something that happened. And if they don't, I ask them, what do you think would work? So it's in a place of paying attention to your own wisdom, as well as paying attention to where you get inspiration, paying attention to the moment, because in the moment, things connect, and that's where we can be creative. And then there's Albert. He's the muse of thinking differently, and he's all about how you can look at the world differently, how you can look at what everybody sees and think something more creative. So he's a real conduit for creative thought. He, more than the other muses, is about coming up with something creative, where the other muses are breaking through some blocks. Be Silly, who you mentioned, is also a real important part of my coaching training, because people, especially perfectionists, and perfectionism, as you may know, is a huge block for people, not only for their creativity, but for their joy in life, just needing to do things perfectly all the time. And what goes along with that is taking ourselves too seriously. So Be Silly is the question to yourself, how can I make this more fun? How can I lighten up a little bit around this? And then there's a muse called Muse Song. She's about, let's start saying nicer things to ourselves, because we're really pretty harsh. Let's hang around people who believe in us instead of choosing these people who are putting us down as much as possible. Let's look for role models, people that we can look to inspire us. So she's all about keeping good company, including the voices in your own head. And then there's Spills, and that's the muse of allowing yourself to be imperfect, embracing mistakes, knowing that the process can be more important than the product. And when you get into the process and enjoy it, all of a sudden the product takes care of itself. And the process is most of it. So if you're not enjoying the process, you're not going to show up for yourself. Then there is Audacity, and that's the muse of courage. The creative process needs courage, needs confidence. So that chapter is all about how can you act as if you have it? Because in the creative process, when you pretend, oftentimes you come up to what you're pretending to do, including having a little bit more confidence. Mm-hmm. So she gives all sorts of prompts and techniques. All of these muses have prompts and journaling and quotes to help fortify what they're teaching. After Audacity is the lull. People don't realize how important taking a break is, especially when you're right in the midst of the creative process or any process in your life, and you start to lose perspective, or you can't figure out where to go anymore. Just taking a break and trusting that the process is going to be there and your creativity will be there once you get back.
Yeah.
Then there's the shadow muse, and that's the muse all about the dark side. Our dark side, our anger, our sadness has been so responsible for poetry and performance art and music. So it's honoring that, being more compassionate about the undesirable aspects of ourselves, and freeing up a lot of energy. So we're not suppressing what we don't like about ourselves. We're looking at it in terms of what its potential is for creativity. Yeah. And then the last one is Marge, and she's the muse of, okay, now let's get started. And she's fashioned after Marge from the movie Fargo. And just that real Midwestern that you can relate to persona of, you know, if you're not getting something done, maybe it's because you haven't started something. And maybe the inspiration doesn't come first. Maybe if you start working, then the inspiration comes. So that's the muses in a nutshell.
That is brilliant and so, so, so true on how we, I'm just muting you guys. Thank you, Nancy. And the how each piece at different days we need to call on different aspects of these muses to support us, and being aware that there's lots of ways that we can sabotage ourselves. You know, there's so many ways that we can get in our own way. So thank you for that, for going through them. I would love to know, you started a little bit, like when you said you were doing the therapy thing, you noticed the young people, the adolescents or teens that you were working with, really get breakthroughs when they were playing with the art. And I'm curious, is that where creativity and play and curiosity, I mean, where did that get to be like the focus of your work?
I think it's just one of those things that you're drawn towards. You know, I just assumed everybody loved creativity because I loved it so much. But the reason I went into occupational therapy and psychiatry is because I saw the potential of play and creating, and it became a really indirect way for these adolescents to gain self-esteem. You know, instead of talking one-to-one, why don't you feel better about yourself? They had these success experiences. Mm-hmm. And when you're an adolescent, your body's out of control, your mind is out of control, and they were in a hospital, so they were even further out of control. And emotionally, they were out of control. So given this art to express themselves, or crafts to build, they found a place where they felt safe, where they felt a sense of mastery, and that fascinated me as well. And how we approach one thing in our lives is much the same way how we approach everything. So if we begin to do creative things and just tweak our approach a little bit, that same approach, that same coping skill, that same way that we figured that out can be a way that we approach the rest of the world. So plus fun has just been a big part of my life. I'm just one of those people that is really drawn towards having fun. It was really important for me to have fun writing my books. That's why there was muses in the first one. The second one is to take off on the Old Farmer's Almanac, and the third one is to take off on an owner's manual to a car. So that just was so much more fun to write than just really dry creativity.
Yeah, thank you. Because that's, and I love that. The almanac I actually pulled out to look at September 15th because I had not looked at it in a few months, and it's so fun to just look and see what you have on there. Recently, I heard Oprah asking Christy Ann Northrup about her morning ritual. And it dawned on me that just about every woman that I deeply admire who has been up to big stuff in the world, they have a pretty religious ritual, or they're pretty good at their self-care, at least for that little bit of time in the morning. And I'm curious if you have a morning ritual, and if you do, would you share it with us?
Absolutely. It's probably the same as a lot of people's morning ritual, but I get up and it's really important for me to do a little bit of yoga in the morning. and to do some meditation. Meditation is a really big connection to my creativity. So once I've done that, I'm grounded. My day is really different if I don't do that meditation and yoga. And also, the morning is my creative time. So as much as possible, I get my cup of tea and I do some writing and take a walk. Taking a walk is also just, it's when you assign some time in your life during the day to your creativity and ask questions, the muse seems to show up. So my walks have become so fertile for my creative ideas, or when I get stuck, I just take a question for a walk. And that needs to happen as daily as possible as well.
Love that.
So those 3 or 4 things just set the stage for the rest of the day. And if I get stuck, it's really important for me to do a little bit of reading, either reading something that I've written or reading something that inspires me, because that fuels my own creativity.
Yes.
So those things are a regular part of my morning.
And I'm finding that I'm going to my bookshelf more often now versus picking up my phone and reading through emails in the morning. I'd rather start my day with something that feeds me versus I feel depleted if I look at email. I mean, reviewing my calendar is a good piece, but the rest of it, it can always wait.
Well, that's a good point. One of the other things that's included, I have to admit that I am a big fan of Facebook, but I saw Facebook as something that was robbing me of some important creative time. So for me, I turned it into something creative. Every day I put a creative prompt on Facebook, and I have a whole slew of friends who respond to that prompt. So for me, it really justifies being on Facebook because I'm doing something creative. And in addition to that, it triggers so much creative thought in other people. I feel like I'm doing a little public service.
Definitely.
I'm just amazed because the same people keep showing up year after year, and I see their creativity. They think they're having fun because I ask these little ridiculous questions, or today I had them caption a picture, and I see their creativity evolving from the first time they started doing these things. So it just shows how a little daily ritual that can take less than 30 seconds can really benefit you in the long run.
Yeah. And I love your prompts, by the way. I used to just enjoy reading them. And sometimes I felt, what's the judgmental muse? The one that's that would help me with, oh, they're too creative. I can't possibly put an answer on there because there's already all the good stuff's been said. And I know.
Yeah, that's not a muse. That's the fear.
I mean the opposite, the antithesis.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the ways that I actually first met you, besides reading your books and being on some of your teleclasses and things, were at a retreat. And I know you're still doing retreats. Don't you do like writers' retreats? And
I do twice a year in Taos, New Mexico.
Lovely. In your mind, and this is a 2-part question. What are the perfect components? Well, not me rewrite. What are the components of an ideal retreat for you personally?
For me personally?
Yeah, not necessarily leading it, but if you were going to go to one, what would you want to get out of it?
Okay. Well, first thing is just to get away from the routine of life, just the regular routine. I think it's really important for women, but both women and men, to get out of that daily responsibility, because that puts us in a habit and a routine. So when you go to a beautiful place, and I think a beautiful place is a good part of it, and I think it's important that once you get there, you have time to explore that place. But when you go, you kind of clear the palette of your mind, and all of a sudden, and when you go in the spirit of creativity, you become awake more to what's possible creatively. You know, there's kind of a setup when you go on a retreat. I'm going here for creative rejuvenation. However, I have seen some mistakes happen in terms of that, in terms of people And this is one of the biggest creative blocks for people, having unrealistic expectations. Okay, I'm going to go to this retreat and I'm going to spend this many hours writing. And they get there and they just want to play. So I think it's really important to have play time, to have time to explore, to lower your expectations and just be curious about what could happen instead of going, I'm going to go there, I'm going to write this much, this is going to be a big turning point in my life. That pressure can really sabotage your experience. For me, in my retreats, laughter is a big part of it. So sitting around the table, connecting with other people who are attracted to my retreats seem to be tribe members. Because I'm so quirky, non-quirky people usually don't show up. So there's this wonderful quirky bond. And you know,
it was magical. I mean, the quirky, it fed into this amazing, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, and just allowing, I have an agenda, but not sticking to that agenda when, you know, it's part of the whole creative process to look at what else could happen here, to have some sort of intuitive detour from what we've written down, to all of a sudden go out and look at the sunset and write about it, to all of a sudden have some sort of group activity that we weren't going to have because the moment dictated it. And I have little field trips to cafes, especially in Taos. So we go there and we immerse ourselves in the locals. And because Taos is such a creative place, that just feels real creative, and we're writing and just the new energy that comes from that. Good food. Good food's a really important part, especially for women, going and not having to worry about fixing those meals, but being taken care of, being nurtured that way. You know, there's a choice with the retreats I have to include just breakfast and lunch, or breakfast and lunch and dinner. But I always include the dinner, even though it costs me more money, because for one thing, it's so spectacularly delicious. But another thing, it just takes away the stress of having to know where you're going to eat and providing that for yourself. So having your needs taken care of, being pampered, lowering the pressure, relaxing, all of those things make retreats just really an investment in yourself. They're just so worth the price and the time that it takes to go into them. That was a great question.
Yeah, love that. And because creativity is so important in our lives, where do you think we've gotten out of track? I mean, so many people don't even know how to get back to it. I mean, do you have, and I want you to actually talk about Kaizen Muse too, because that whole process of taking the smaller steps, it makes it easier. But if you were called in to do like a VIP day with somebody who was just so totally stuck and couldn't get out of their head, how would you guide them in one particular direction? Well, first of all, let's explain what Kaizen Muse means, because for our listeners.
Okay, Kaizen Muse. Kaizen is a Japanese word that means continuous improvement through small steps. And it's the way Toyota initially became really successful. Rather than huge innovation, little tiny improvements were made. And it lowered the pressure, once again, on its employees, so they came up with more creative ideas. So in the realm of creativity, it's really taking people out of unrealistic expectations, high pressure expectations. I'm going to work for 3 hours today, I'm going to take a block of time to do this. I'm going to be when I sit down to write, it's going to be the best writing ever. These expectations just paralyze people. So Kaizen is, instead of for 3 hours, do it for 5 minutes. In fact, instead of even 5 minutes, just point yourself toward the desk or ask a question. And that removes the pressure. Once the pressure is removed, a momentum can occur. And that's when people can get into the flow versus I'm going to push myself to do 3 hours. That's just this relentless pressure, and it's not fun. So Kaizen is breaking things down to small steps, and they're much smaller than a lot of people. Sometimes when I ask a client, what would be your next small step? They go, okay, I'm going to show up every single day for half an hour. And we have to be the small step police and say, do an intervention and just just make the suggestion. What if you showed up for 5 minutes? Then you have a success experience after 5 minutes, and that's going to create more energy. You can go as long as you like, but once that 5 minutes is up, you've succeeded. If you say I'm going to go for half an hour and you go for 15 minutes, you failed. But you've really gotten something done. So it's all really a frame, a perspective and it's very brain related. The man I work with, Robert Maurer, has written a book, The Kaizen Way, and talks about how our amygdala shuts off our cortex. So that's the fear center of our brain, cuts off the creative center of our brain, even for something as small as what am I going to come up with when I write? I have to write for an hour. That brings up even a little bit of fear for people. It's not going to work as well as let's remove that fear completely by going, what if you wrote something really crappy for 30 seconds? That gets people going. It even challenges them, and then they can continue. And the muse part of Kaizen Muse is based on those muses I went through, those principles. Let's make it fun. Let's be kind to ourselves. And this whole model of coaching is founded on compassion versus pressure. So people are so hard on themselves. Just this tormenting voice inside of ourselves keeps us from being as creative as we can. So being able to accept things, even accepting our fear. I was working with somebody yesterday, and she was fearing writing a blog because of what people might think about that, and wanting to get rid of the fear. One of the first places we might start with that is just accept that fear is a really important part of the process. It's going to be there anyway. And once we start to accept something, paradoxically, it goes away. So to answer your original question, what's getting in the way of people these days? A lot of it is overload. There's so many clients I have, they're just completely overwhelmed by the amount of information out there, the amount of ideas they have, by the amount of responsibilities they have, by how much they want to be creative, but how much they feel is standing in their way. So it's really important to address where this overwhelming feeling is coming from. We're also in the habit, we've been trained by the internet and by all of this technology to have really short attention spans. We can click on things and immediately go from shopping to information to our friends to social media. And that is really having an effect on being able to focus. And people don't understand the hold that a habit like that can have on us. So they're really frustrated when they're trying to focus on something and they notice their attention span. People have the badge of a short attention span. I have ADD or I procrastinate. But these things are really coming from a place of frustration that they're not being able to concentrate more. They're not being able to take an idea and do something with it, translate it. There's so much in the creative process that is complicated, that brings up our own demons. And the first place to start with that is awareness. That creative chaos is normal. That when you start an idea, this spiritual electricity runs through you and you're excited about this and you're lifted out of old habits and you buy all of this material and you take all of these classes, but you get to the wall. And almost everybody gets to that wall where the demons perk up and go, what were you thinking? This isn't a good idea. Somebody's already doing it. You don't know where to go with this. You're not qualified. That's a really normal part of the process. And in order to get through it, we have to know, number one, that it's okay that that's there, or else people quit because they think something's wrong with them. And number two, how do you get through this? And part of it is breaking things down to small steps, accepting yourself, having some parallel universe time with somebody else, which really works well, and just making it easier to show up at little chunks at a time, so you're developing a new habit. So I'm blah blah blah.
No, I love it. I love it, and I've got like 12 more questions from that. So first off, you were in the forefront in my mind in terms of when I didn't know what a creativity coach was. I didn't understand why we needed them nearly as much 10 years ago. And you've been doing this almost 20 years. And I'm just curious, how did that be? Because this is one of the things I'm working with these evolutionary entrepreneurial people like me who are at the forefront, and we're the ones that are kind of leading the way, lighting the way for others to follow. What did it feel like to be in the front like that? And did you have to work through any kind of discomfort when it came to being different, being seen, being quirky, to use your word? I mean, did you struggle with how to be seen in that way?
At one point, after I started coaching, it was when life coaching started to become big in terms of getting certified. And so I felt like I needed to get certified because I was just inventing what I was doing as I went along. So I started to take a life coaching training, and I realized I didn't want to take a training because I didn't want other people's ideas in my head. I really wanted to develop it organically. And it was life coaching, and it wasn't creativity coaching. And I actually didn't think of, I am one of the first people to do this. I was just really doing something that I enjoyed. I wasn't thinking, are people going to buy this? I had this passion, and it didn't seem like anything could stop me. At one point I did panic, and I took a job because I thought, what am I doing here? The fears were louder than the other voices. And it was a complete disaster to take a job. It just told me, no, your other pathway was the right pathway. So, they say do what you love and the money will follow and stuff like that. But I don't think it's that easy, but I think in order to do something entrepreneurial, there's a couple factors that have to come into play. And I teach this in my course. One of them is passion, because another one is perseverance. Unless you have a lot of passion for what you want to do, you're not going to persevere. Right. You're going to come up against the doubt. And I think what got me through the doubt was just, number one, I really felt like this is what I was here to do. It was just coming to me, and I didn't want to hear other people's ways they did it, because I wanted it to be completely original, because it was creativity. And some of the other things, there needs to be a need for it. And I found so many people were paralyzed and overwhelmed. The response to my first book was people saying, I'm all of those things. I'm resistant. I can't figure out where to go. And so I saw a real need for this. And being the, kind of universally codependent. So I need to help people out there. I was like, I need to do this because of the need is so great. So putting that together and having a system and also having the confidence is another big one that will help people become successful in coming up with something of your own. And for me, because I came from a very difficult background, it wasn't hard to be rebellious. I think that's one of the gifts we get when we come from a really controlling background, childhood that we didn't enjoy. We have this place of rebellion that it's like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And I think that really served me. And I know a lot of creative people are like that. And my coaching honors that we can't tell people what to do. I teach the coaches I train, you're not going to be telling anybody what to do. And if you do, I'm going to make you do it over again. Because when you tell people what to do, even if it's the answer, they might be excited about it initially, but people are going to rebel against being told what to do, especially creative people. So we need to ask questions. Yeah. And we need to ask ourselves questions as well. Right. What's going to make this easy? What am I passionate about? Even if those questions don't have immediate answers, just keep asking them.
Yes. And And I think that one of the words that comes up for me for you is that one of the reasons why I admire you is that you have always shown who you are. You're not trying to be, anybody else. You're being Jill. And there's something very admirable about being willing to be that authentic and that vulnerable and just saying, this is who I am and this is what I love to do. And this is who I am in the world. And you just are. And did you have any discomfort around being able to show up in that way? Or do you have any guidance for women who are feeling the discomfort of, okay, I have an MBA, I used to be a consultant, and now I'm a priestess and I want to work with women on their inner blocks to their success. People have some issues with too much information of who we really are. But if we don't honor who we are, then how can we be authentic? So I'm just curious, do you ever struggle with that? Like, how much of you do you really show? Or do you have guidance for others to help them show more of themselves?
That's an interesting question, because I get that all the time. People saying you're so authentic and you're so vulnerable, and it makes me a little worried that I'm hearing too much, because I really am just being myself and I'm not thinking, I think I'll be vulnerable here. Sometimes when people say that, I go, isn't everybody like this? And you're right. People aren't like this, but it's what I know. And I guess, for me, there's boundaries. I know sometimes people share too much, but in my coaching, I encourage my coaches to share their story because it makes us more real. I encourage them to share their mistakes because perfectionism is such a big part of the blocks for creativity, and to be comfortable with them. To be comfortable, to me, it's so liberating. I know when I first was going to be an entrepreneur, I went to networking meetings where they taught you to make business plans, and I hated it. I hated doing what other people were doing because it wasn't me. And I said to myself, if this is the way you have to do it, then I'm not going to do it. I'm going to just invent my own way. So I think of a lot of it comes from that rebellion again. It comes from, if I can't do it this way, I don't want to do it at all. And it also, I think, comes from a place of compassion for other people. When other people are sharing their plights with me, I just want to go, I know, I feel that too. And I've had so many clients and students say, it really made a difference that you shared that you went through this stuff, that, I've been through depression. And I guess I've lost a lot of the pride, not pride in a good way, but the pride that makes you think that you're better than another person, or that you need to look like you're better than another person. I am drawn towards authentic people. So I guess that gives me more permission to be authentic myself. And the other thing is, I know for me, I don't want to work with people that don't get me. So being who I truly am is a screening device.
Yeah.
My website is a screening device. I know a lot of people go to it and go, whoa, never mind on this one. But a lot of people go to it and go, oh my God, I feel like this is talking to me.
Yes.
So it really, being yourself, a lot of people may not like you, but the people who do, like the coaches that take my class and the people that come to my retreat, they are kindred spirits. And I don't want to work with people who aren't kindred spirits. So I think it really serves. And thank you for asking that question. It's a mind-boggling question. It's a good one.
Good. It's good. Thank you. So a couple things, and then I want to open it up for questions. But one is, who do you admire? If you could choose anyone to sit and have a cup of tea with, is there somebody in it, alive, not alive? Who would that be?
Oh, there's so many people I admire. The first that come to mind are women like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler.
Oh,
because they have that. I'm not going to let what's gone before me limit me, and their drive and their commitment.
yeah.
That kind of thing. I would love to sit down with Joni Mitchell, although I know she's having a hard time right now. But her genius, just to be able to talk to somebody. But I just really look up to her as somebody who really was true to herself as well. Georgia O'Keeffe. My fourth book is actually about a lot of these people and what they have to teach us. Georgia O'Keeffe, we see her paintings, and one of the biggest messages she had to give us was, I really don't care what you think about what I've painted. In fact, I don't care if you like it, and I don't care if you don't like it. It's me who's the most important person here. And I know what I like, and I'm putting it out there whether you like it or not. So there's all sorts of people who have gone before that have all of these little ways to teach us. Just anybody who is out there and not worrying about what other people think, I think is really a wonderful role model for us.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. And I can't wait to see your book on Georgia O'Keeffe. That'll be fun. And that was my next question is, what is next for you? What is your next new chapter? Will you share? Do you know?
I'd love to. I'm kind of obsessed with it right now because it's a combination of creativity and spirituality, which I guess the new word for spirituality is mindfulness. So I'll accept that. But I think there's such wonderful parallels. And I did a course last summer called Finding Uber Bliss. And it was the combination of creativity and seeing things differently and finding an inner sanctuary with spirituality, and how being in the creative process, we get all sorts of spiritual qualities. You have to be resilient. You have to be patient. You become a more interesting person. You have to have solitude. So all the things that you need for creativity also serve you for mindfulness, being in the present moment. So it's this journey to the present moment and what we have to go through, including changing our inner narrator, having this inner sanctuary, seeing things differently. So it's another illustrated book on just, prompts, these stories from all of these people, Georgia O'Keeffe, E.E. Cummings, Rumi quotes, and how they can teach us. Dennis Hopper, all of these directors and writers. I'm listening to Alec Baldwin's interview with movie stars, and even somebody like Kristen Wiig. She or however you say her last name, Kristen Wiig, but she answered the question when Alec Baldwin asked, what's next for you? What's your goal? She said, I don't like the word goal. She said, I'm just kind of taking what comes to me, which is a really spiritual approach to creativity. She goes, anytime I tried to make a goal, something different happened anyway. This is the nonlinear process of creativity. She said, maybe I'll go to Paris and live. And he goes, yeah, you'd last in Paris for like 2 months. And she said, then I would have been in Paris for 2 months. How great is that? So it's just, let me put myself out there and follow these instincts I have. And whatever it turns out to be, let me just embrace it for what it is and enjoy it. So I can go on for a long time talking about this.
No, I love that. I'm excited for that. And will that be in the form of a course or a book, or how will you teach?
It's going to be a book and a course and a retreat and mugs and T-shirts.
The full, you can walk and get, what do you call it, where you immerse yourself in this.
Yeah, totally. And if there's anybody out there that wants me to come and speak, I'm putting together a speaking tour just to get the information out about
Lovely. So I wanted to open it up to see if we had any questions, but the one thing I wanted to ask you is just for our listeners to know, because a lot of the women I work with, a lot of them are doing some kind of coaching, or they're in a management position where they need to coach as part of their role. Can you give us an idea of what a creativity coach would do in terms of supporting an employee or in a business setting? Like how would you take, what would be an exercise that you might do to support somebody who's at a crossroads, for example, needing to make a decision?
Making a decision within the business, or
right, like maybe even like, do I take this next position, or do I maybe go over here and start my own business, or not sure, kind of feeling stuck and not knowing what to do?
I would do some of the things that seem to work the best, and that is ask if they've been at a crossroads in their life before, and what did they do that worked for them. So starting with their own resources, and then going into what else do you think would work. So instead of giving advice, I would first of all ask them some things. Another place that we go is we really develop people's intuition, so that helps them make the kinds of decisions that serve them the most. So the way we do that is relaxing people, taking them in a guided relaxation type of thing, and then having them to do some fill-in sentences, and giving them some incomplete sentences and having them continue with it just really quickly so they don't have that fear and the critic intervening. Just, a really good exercise in terms for people helping them make their decisions is to do some time travel, because we really have a lot of the information. It's just like, what if it were 5 years from now? Why don't you kind of picture where you're at and then look back on how you got through this decision? And it's amazing what people come up with when you empower them with that kind of imagination and intuition. So.
That's brilliant. And because I think sometimes people think if it's creativity, that means she's going to make me dance the answer or draw or paint the answer, or I think a lot of times people get stuck in that it has to be an art based, which I know.
Yes, totally. It's just a different perspective. It's creative. We're creative every day in terms of how we look at things and the thoughts that we choose to think. So it's thinking differently about things and the things that we're saying to ourselves, and not second guessing ourselves, but going with kind of our gut feeling. Yeah.
Right. Besides some of the women that you've already named, are there any other inspirational people that you channel or you learned from that have helped influence you and your work?
Well, yeah, this is going to sound weird, but creative. Sometimes, for me, and I think a lot of women, sometimes I flounder a little bit with confidence and with pushing myself. And sometimes I channel Dolly Parton. So I just go, honey, you can do this. And a little tough love, that she has, Marge from Fargo, some of those characters. I'll see a character in a movie, and I will think about that character so much because of their confidence. Or, I remember years ago, it was Jodie Foster in the movie Contact, because she was so devoted to what she was doing, and just asking myself, what would it be like to be like that person? I think has really empowered me. It's given me permission. I think we can get permission from other people, permission from Oprah Winfrey, permission from some of these women who are growing older, but they don't give a darn. They're just out there being themselves, not worrying about the aging process at all. And there's a lot of them, and I think that's one of the advantages of social media, is to be able to see these women out there and to use their influence for us and not compare ourselves, but go, what is one way this person can inspire me?
Yeah. Oh, Meryl Streep, she just wrote, did you hear this? She wrote 453 letters to every member of Congress to ask them to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And, and I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, she's not busy, and that's what makes me feel like, okay, if she can take the time to do that because it's important, then I can surely find time for some things that are important to me. So
exactly.
Beautiful. So I am looking at the chat box, and I am not, let me do a refresh, seeing any other questions if anybody has any. Because one of the things I just wanted to ask them, because I know we have a lot of people that download these and listen to these later, how would someone find you if they had questions, if they wanted to learn more about you. We've talked about your book, but what about the Kaizen Muse creativity coaching training, or, you know, when's your next retreat, your writer's retreats? Just give me some information on how they can find you.
Yes, they can email me at jillbadonsky@hotmail, or you can go to kaizenmuse.com, and Kaizen is KaizenMuse.com. If you're not on a tablet or an iPhone, you can also go to the Muses but that has a flash animation at the beginning of it, so not everybody can get that. But also just Google Jill Badonsky. My next retreat in Taos is in February, at the beginning of February, so it's nice and cool and cozy. But I do them every July and probably now every February. And I also do trainings beginning February and August every year. So that's the 17-week training to be certified as a Kaizen Muse creativity coach.
Okay. The other question I had for you is, if I were getting ready to write a book, do your writers' retreats just support us on opening up the creativity to get, or do we actually leave with anything? I know that you're in this, not like wanting to give this high expectation so that we get, which is a good idea. But I mean, like, would we leave with an outline, or would we have your guidance on how would that work?
You would have a lot of creative passion for your book. You'd have some time to work on it while you're there. And when I'm at the retreat, I'm available to people in terms of helping them get started. So we don't sit down and go, okay, let's write an outline for a book. We sit down and do prompts that just get people in touch with a greater part of their creativity than they may be aware that they have, and loosen that up. But I leave enough free time at the retreats for people, because it's so important to have solitude, and those retreats just are charged with creativity. So people have enough time by themselves to get started on something. And they have being with other people who are doing the same thing. It's just such a supportive environment in terms of getting a good start on something, or continuing with something that you come to a stop with, or that you just want to find some new juice for. So.
Love that. Because I keep saying, you know, this will be the year I write a book. Well, 2016 will probably be the year, because 2015 is over pretty much. But well, thank you for your time. And I'm just going to ask one more time of the folks that are listening live, do you guys have any questions? Because I do not see anything in the chat box. I can unmute you if you do. Carmen, I've unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Hi. Thank you, Jill. You know what made me very excited was at the very beginning when you said you went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, because your career just kept taking you through all these various paths. And that's kind of like I'm mimicking whatever you did, because I've gone from one thing to the next without a real clear focus of what I was going to do. So I think it's wonderful that you use your creativity, because that's where I feel like my heart is trying to find where my creativity is, and trying to find a passion in what I work, in my work, I should say, and my creativity. So thank you very much. It was very inspirational.
You're welcome. And just keep asking the question, you know, where am I supposed to be with this? But also accept that that's your path, and it's beautiful to have that courage to go from thing to thing, and give yourself credit for having the courage to do that. I think we really sometimes fall short in giving ourselves credit for being that courageous. So I applaud you for that. For sure.
Thank you. So I question my courage, because I get to a point where, oh my God, how did I get here?
I know that feeling.
You know? And you even mentioned something about, you know, can I really do this? So that question is always in my head. So thank you for courage.
Excellent.
Think past that question.
So I just want to thank you again. It was a real pleasure to reconnect with you besides Facebook. And I am hoping to cross paths with you very soon at one of your retreats.
Oh, same here. Great questions, great interview. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank everyone for joining us today, and for whoever listens to us down the road. Okay, I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.